Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, Employee Onboarding, the Importance of Safety from the Start. My name is Michelle Wilcox and I will be your moderator today, and I will also be monitoring questions you may have during the session. Before we start, let's review a couple of key items. All of the webinar materials we discuss can be found at the URL currently showing on your screen. I will be sharing this URL in a follow-up email, so don't feel like you need to write it down right now. If you have trouble with your internet connection during the webinar, we recommend leaving the presentation and logging back in. We do not control the audio, your devices do. So if you have audio difficulties, try adjusting the volume settings on your device. If a telephone line goes dead during the call, hang up and call back again at the same number. If all lines go dead, watch the on-screen chat box for an alternative call-in number. Feel free to ask questions or provide feedback by using the chat or questions box during the webinar. If you are using a tablet, you may need to tap on the screen for the options bar to appear, and then you can select the appropriate option. We may not respond immediately, but we will work your questions or feedback into the presentation, and I believe we're going to hold off questions and comments until the end because there's a lot of material we're going to be going over. If you can't get if we can't get to your comment or question during the session, we will be online afterwards to respond, or we may follow up in an email if we run completely out of time. You may also email us at moderator@aspenrmg.com for up to 48 hours after the webinar. This will be a 1-hour presentation. Questions and comments are very much encouraged, and the presenter will be answering questions at the end. And lastly, we have a number of upcoming webinars covering a variety of topics, including those listed at the Hetfinon webinar website. With that being said, let's begin today's webinar. Our presenter today is Phaedra Katopoulos. As a human resources professional for both large and small companies, she specializes in safety training and employee retention. She believes that the activities behind the scenes should always be guided by a company's best practices, and that this is invaluable to employers and employees. Her experience includes loss control operations, human resources, retail, and banking, with her ability to maintain and coordinate with multiple safety professionals and safety management systems. She conducted HR and safety trainings for a large Fortune 500 company and feels that safety and HR best practices should be built into the culture of a company. She believes safety is taught not just by simple instruction, by example and repetition. She has a heartfelt desire to assist people and to teach them how to be safer in the way that they do things, with the priority being placed upon building positive interactions on all levels and aiding in increasing the overall effectiveness of the client's loss control and safety programs. Thank you, Phaedra. I'm going to go ahead and turn this presentation over to you now.
Thank you, Michelle. All right. Okay, so my screen is showing. I'm going to put it in presentation mode because that's what we all prefer it to be in. Let's see if it'll click. Let me swap my slides here because it always defaults to the one I don't want. Thank you all so much for coming to the presentation. It's always great to get to spend a little bit of time with people and get to try to help guide your engagement as it goes with safety and HR. So before we get started, Michelle told you a little bit about myself, but what I can tell you is I came to the HR and safety aha moment. Gosh, it's been going on 12 or 14 years ago now, and it was due in part to one of my instructors and the way that they taught the safety class. So when I found that HR and safety really should fit together, just instead of being silos, right? They should be part and parcel of each other. So that was my niche. That was going to be where I was going to focus my time. So as HR people, right, you get to help to build the teams and grow the organization. And as safety people, we get to be an outside set of eyes that has a different perspective, and we get to learn from each person, each company, and every part and every employee of that company. So we're going to go ahead and get started.
Now, I promise not to read slides verbatim with a few exceptions, and this is one of those exceptions. One, this presentation is not meant to be a legal binding contract. This information is provided as guidance. In regards to the presentation, employee onboarding, the importance of safety from the start. This explores the critical role of workplace safety in the onboarding process. We're going to address some of the importance of integrating safety protocols and training into the orientation of new employees, ensuring that they have the knowledge and skills necessary to maintain a safe and secure workplace. We'll be highlighting the importance of establishing a culture of safety from the beginning of the onboarding process and the ways in which this can improve employee retention, job satisfaction, and overall workplace morale. We're also going to use some real-world examples so that you can all gain a clear understanding of the benefits of prioritizing safety in the onboarding process, as well as the potential risks and consequences of failing to do so. By the end of this presentation, you will have a better understanding of the importance of safety in the workplace and how it can be actively integrated into the onboarding process to create a safer, healthier, and more productive work environment. All right, a little bit about the who, the what, the why, and the how, right? But before we dive into some stats, let's have a little story moment. I'm sure, as you all know, the internet brings us some good and some bad. Now, like the safety third pin or the safety fourth meme, these popped up for me at some point, and I couldn't help but think that sadly, safety really can get relegated to third, fourth, or even lower on the list. So how do we keep that from happening? There are some commonly used phrases like safety first, safety is our number one priorities. And these sound really great, right? We've all heard them. Heck, maybe we've said them or we say them. But when we look at priorities, they change. So instead of making it a priority, let's make safety one of our top core values. As a friend of mine likes to say, make it safety always. Now, some of us on this presentation may not have grown up with the click it or ticket seatbelt public announcements on TV. Those were always telling us that seatbelts save lives. Instead, maybe you grew up with parents or others who set the example of wearing a seatbelt and being told to buckle up by them. So naturally, hopefully, you all get into a vehicle and you buckle up. But you're also doing the same with your little ones in the vehicle, right? You look back and you make sure they're buckled in. But now think about it. When is the last time you saw one of those commercials? Those are few and far between. They might exist, but not in the volume they did way back in the 80s and 90s. So what is it that this example specifically shows us? This shows us that we can modify human behavior and habits by using regular, ongoing reinforcement, by setting the example of what and how something is to be done correctly, because repetition matters. We need to set the example of safety always, doing things correctly, and that safety is more than just a word or a group of phrases we say. Each of us and our teams, our employees, we can make a difference because we are the who. The what is employee onboarding and getting those new hires on the right track early on. The why? Well, that's because we want and need a safe working environment. It benefits our companies and our employees. Now, the how. We can partner with the hiring managers, safety departments, and of course, human resources to get our onboarding process in line with our values and goals. Holy moly, I know. That's the busiest slide you have ever seen. Trust me, it's the only one like this, and it's intended to be a visual eyesore. Listen, charts and graphs aren't really my favorite visual aid, but for some people, they love them. Maybe some of you love them. This is data that I've reviewed in the past. And what I'm focusing on is 2021, 2023. I have layered the number of claims by service year, so how many years somebody's been with the company, over the top of the average cost incurred per claim. I want you to see that these don't always line up the way that maybe our thought process thinks they should. So while loss data can help us see where our employee tenure is at, right? Who's having those injuries? It's also helpful in reminding us that we need to be conducting regular and thorough loss reviews, because those aid us in finding trends. These reviews can help us to provide training, personal protective equipment, you'll hear me refer to that as PPE, or even for us to see that we should possibly alter a job task to prevent future occurrences. Or maybe, just maybe, we don't even have the right person in the job. Or maybe somebody isn't following the right procedure, not using the right tool. So remember, don't focus just solely on the duration or just solely on the expense of the injury. It's a good starting point, but sometimes an expensive claim might be a one-off type of a claim, and you may need to look at other indicators, the frequency of how something is being done, and work on getting those controls in place. So more about the loss conversation. Who is it that's getting injured? Well, there's a large firm that put out a study stating that 35% of workers' compensation injuries happen in the first year on the job. They broke it out by industry. And just because you don't see your industry up here in these pretty red circles, don't think that you're exempt from being, you know, a little bit of in that mix just because your industry isn't listed. But those top industries that they did break out is 52% of those are early on in restaurants, 44 in construction, 39 in both retail and transportation, 35 in both services and wholesale, and then 30% in manufacturing. If we're to think about that really busy chart that I just showed you, a note about that is that the top causes of injuries are based on the number of claims, right? So these exist across all industries. It's sprains and strains. So everybody has something that somebody could get a sprain or a strain from. And then the top body part that's getting injured is upper extremities. I'm not 100% sure why that is. I just know that that's part of what we see. Now, a little more into that data that was on the screen previously is age group 18 to 29. They have the highest number of claims in this reviewed time period. So maybe it's because they're newer to the workforce. Maybe they have less experience. Then when we look at the age group 60 or over, they're having the most severe injuries per injury. So those costs per injury are higher. Now, there could be a variety of reasons for that. And I want you to know that we don't have the data set that tells us how many employees, right? The number of employees per bracket group. So there could be some skew a little this way or that way because that's how data is. But we're seeing a lot of injuries early on for the young people and then costly injuries later on for those further along in years. We're going to want to, and right below that 60 plus group is the 50 to 59-year-olds. So I don't think that the trends are too surprising. But now let's talk about years of service. And this relates to what we're seeing on the screen. Employees at 0 to 6 months have the highest frequency based on that data I showed you. So within the 2 to 5 years, they're second runner-up for how many injuries they're having. These interesting trends for service of time, they show us that we really need to focus on those first few months of service to have the greatest impact on new employees. Some questions to ask would be, why are we seeing, making air quotes, seasoned employees having more injuries, right? So when I'm thinking seasoned, I think anybody after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that's no longer really new on the job. So why are they still having those higher injuries? Maybe did we not get the onboarding completed as thoroughly or effectively as we had hoped? Could we need to do more consistent updates on safety trainings, more reviews of processes and procedures? Are we not continuing to set the example on a daily basis? How is it that we can make it safety always? These are all really great questions to be considering. Now, since we're on the topic, I also want to show you some very positive trends from that data. In the years of service, when we looked at that 10 plus years, they only had just over 1,000 injuries. And then 5 to 10 years, they were just barely below that. So we're seeing that the longer somebody is in the job, on the job, the fewer injuries they are having. We really want to harness that experience and bring it further down the line to our new employees. A great way to do that is mentoring new hires or partnering them up with a more senior employee, senior in tenure with the company. So let's go ahead and get into that a little bit. We want to set some expectations, get some facilitating of smooth transitions going, and get some good promotion of positive engagement. So before we get into the who, what, why, and how of employee onboarding, I'd like to ask each of you, and you can type, oh, I may have skipped. Hold on, please pause. I think I have a polling question up next, so I shouldn't ask my question. So sorry. You'll get my question and the polling question. So we'll just pretend I didn't ask that.
Okay, so the polling question, Phaedra, is how many of you have an onboarding process? If you can select yes, we have one, or no, we need one. And we'll give a couple seconds here for everybody. We appreciate your participation.
Thanks, Michelle. Sorry about that.
That's all right. And it looks like 75% have voted. So I'm going to say 92% say yes, and the remaining say no, that they need one. So 93 and 7%.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. So now that we have that little part out of the way, let's talk about what the concept of employee onboarding is. It is the process of incorporating a new employee into a company and familiarizing them with the culture and process. What does this help us to do? It helps the employee become an effective and contributing member of the team. We're given the opportunity to set expectations for them, of course, cover all the mandated items, but also lay out the groundwork for how we not only want, but also need them to conduct themselves to be productive and, of course, be safe. We get to lay the groundwork for their smooth transition into our organization, who they will work with, and how they will work with them. The new employee learns about our history, our current operations, that might be lightly as applicable, and our goals for them and the company. This is normally day one of their employment with us and likely their first impression of us and probably the human resources team and hiring managers, unless of course they had some one-on-one interviews with them previously. We get this first day to promote engagement with them, to not just talk the safety talk, but to help them understand the whys of what we do and how we do it. That old saying, make a good first impression, counts here. So why do we want to do all this? What are our benefits? Sorry, I put my polling slide in the wrong spot. So we want to do this because it's going to reduce turnover, increase productivity, improve job satisfaction, and enhance safety performance. You've already learned that charts and graphs aren't my best friends. So instead of cramming tons of stats into this, let's talk about the benefits of effective onboarding. What are some of the positive outcomes with effective onboarding? We get reduced turnover. This keeps an employee in their job, either in their job or with the company for longer periods of time. Reduced turnover saves us money in recruiting, hiring, and training costs. Next, there's the increased productivity. This is a positive on many levels, right? One, if they're in their jobs longer, they tend to be more productive. We also get increased productivity by not having injured employees. So our onboarding and training employees from day one or sooner, we'll cover that in a bit, about how we conduct our jobs safely increases productivity. We're going to get a little more into the sooner, right, and how that works in a bit. So now, if we don't have injured workers on our team, overall, our team's going to be more productive as they are at work versus being off or on modified duty, or other team members having to make up for those missing workers. Less injuries and safer workplaces, that gives us improved job satisfaction. Higher job satisfaction really ties back into the reduced turnover and productivity. When an employee feels safe and satisfied in their job, they will often work better, feel better, and with the right employees, they may come up with improved processes or innovative new ideas or products. A satisfied employee is more engaged overall. Last, but certainly not least, we have enhanced safety performance. They know and understand our expectations, the how and why a task is completed a specific way. They are more likely to participate in safety and to engage with others, helping to show another employee the way to safely conduct a task or offer them assistance. They will also be more likely to discuss potential workplace hazards that may need to be corrected. So let's link onboarding to safety performance. Let's look at how it impacts the safety performance and our desired outcome of less injuries, a happier and safer work environment for each employee. Like the seatbelt example, by engaging our safety programs and processes into our employees, not just from day one, but before, and from every day after they walk in our doors, metaphorically speaking, if people are working remotely, we need to train them on the safety programs, where they can be located, what aspects of their job they specifically relate to, and how to make suggestions for improvement if necessary. By ingraining our safety ways into them and reinforcing that with updates and even simple positive reinforcement. Hey, John, thanks for wearing your safety glasses. Hey, Michelle, thanks for using good bending and lifting techniques. That's going to become second nature to them. Muscle memory, if you will. You do a task a certain way for long enough and you just do it. They will instinctively conduct the task in the manner they were trained to do. So, train them to do it correctly. They're going to have a better understanding of how to conduct the job task safely, as well as understanding the company's safety programs, which is going to enable them to participate in accident and incident prevention. Part of preventing accidents and incidents and injuries is through hazard awareness. By being properly onboarded, given a solid understanding of the safety programs and a tour of the workplace, these new employees are far better equipped to aid in in hazard recognition. They have the knowledge and a level of comfort to discuss concerns with managers and supervisors. This relates back to the benefits of effective onboarding: less injuries, more productivity, happier employees, less turnover. It is a continuous cycle, or should be. They build upon their safety experiences with the company and they are more engaged. They have an increased safety mindset, which helps the company maintain and foster its safety culture. The positive cycle continues. What's the role of safety onboarding? Safety is a crucial component of the onboarding process. As we've seen, it gets us started on the correct foot. It also lays the foundation for a strong safety culture. If we have a solid foundation, then whatever we build on top of that should be far more substantial and sturdy. Weak foundations create weak buildings, and that won't serve us or our employees very well. Each task, each training opportunity needs to have a solid base, including the best practice of how to do it, and then tie that into their job, their tasks. Give them real-world examples to make it applicable for them. These solid foundations also increase the strength of the safety culture overall. Of course, we need to share with them the legal and regulatory requirements of how and why safety matters. Don't forget, complying with regulations is truly just the bare minimum, right? OSHA regulations, Cal OSHA regulations, NFPA, all of those regulations. That's the least you can do. We as employers, we need them to do that, and it is an expectation. But we want to be teaching them to do more than the bare minimum, to use industry best practices and to share new and improved methods. By training them that working within the legal requirements is an expectation, we can help reduce the likelihood of an injury as well as reducing potential fines. Fines and injuries are unnecessary expenses that can impact budgets, which can make it harder for an employer to give pay increases, hire more employees, or buy newer equipment. Remind employees that injuries can lead to employees being away from work, and when that happens, other employees have to step in to cover those tasks. All right, Michelle, fire away.
All right, so we got another polling question. Do you feel like safety can positively impact productivity, profitability, and retention? Sorry, I can't talk right now. Yes, it definitely can. Maybe it can. No, it doesn't help, or I'm not sure. You guys can give us your answers, and I like to wait till we get at least 70% vote before I share the responses. Thank you again for participating. We appreciate it. So it looks like 90% say yes, and 11% say maybe it can.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating, and thank you, Michelle. All right, so creating a safety culture from day one, but actually before day one. All right, I get a little extra excited about this part. So starting an employee off on a good foundation or a good path before day one, that helps us to create a safety culture far sooner in our process. So how can we get them involved in our safety culture before day one? Great question. We can involve safety-based questions in our application and in our interview process. These don't have to be in-depth, exhaustive questions, but sometimes we can get insights into how a person feels about safety from simple questions or statements. Some examples of that are, tell me about safety at your last job. Does your candidate go off on a negative tirade about the awful safety manager who kept bothering them about wearing their PPE? Okay, well, that may not be a great indicator for us, right? We don't want somebody who might think that safety and being safe and wearing their PPE is a negative. It's definitely a positive. Do they say they were not involved in safety? Well, maybe they're new to the workforce. Maybe they don't have something to dial into. You may have to dig a little bit. Or do you strike gold and do you get somebody who says, hey, I was on the safety committee or I helped conduct the facility observations? You want those people, right? They've already got an eye. They've already got a thought process about safety. Another possible question could be, did you participate in safety meetings? Again, if they worked for a company that didn't have safety meetings, we might have to finesse that question. We can also ask them, have you ever aided in the recognition of a workplace hazard, right? If they tell you that safety wasn't part of their job, well, safety is always part of your job for everyone. If there weren't any hazards, okay, we always have to think big picture, even if it's an office environment. There are still unknowns, right? Slip, trip, fall hazards, ergonomic hazards, strangers in the parking lots, right? So there are things out there, and we want people to be engaged. So these very simple questions, they can give us a feel for how our potential candidate may feel about it. And it could keep us from hiring someone who has a very negative view of how safety impacts them and their jobs. Of course, you're going to want to work with your HR department or employment law attorneys to make sure that you don't put questions in your applications or in your interview process that we can't ask. That's a completely different presentation. We're not going to get into that today, but do find ways to get a little bit of info on the start or before you've hired them. So on the last slide, we discussed the foundation of our training, as well as setting expectations for following the policies and regulations. Our onboarding and new hire orientation should give them an overview of not just these items, but how they apply to them and their positions. We get to influence how they start and remind them that we want all of our employees to go home in the very least in the same condition they came to work in, which hopefully means going home with all of their digits and their faculties intact. Let's identify some safety essential topics. All right, we have 4 key topics: hazard recognition, emergency procedures, personal protective equipment, PPE, and safe work practices. Why? For now, we're going to keep this a little top level and maybe get a little more into them later. The simple version is we want our employees to recognize and report hazards, for them to know the evacuation is getting away from me. Know the evacuation routes, including the meeting points or a shelter-in-place location. Where are the fire extinguishers? How to use them? Where to find first aid kits, AEDs if you have them, who's CPR and first aid certified if you have that. Then, lastly, in regards to emergency procedures, what numbers to call. PPE, we want them to know the requirements. We shouldn't start somebody on a job in a role without making sure that we have not just provided them with the proper PPE, but we've trained them on the care and use of it. Remember, not everybody's built the same as you. You may have to work with an employee to get the best fit for them. Like everything, reinforce it. Remind them to wear it. Safe work practices are how do we get the job done safely and how to work safely in our facility. Include more than the bare minimum. Teach them the best practices. Utilize some job safety hazard analysis, JSAs, job hazard analysis, JHAs, SOPs, standard operating procedures, right? These are all great tools. They're my favorite tools. Ask the employee questions to ensure they understood what they were being trained on. Have them demonstrate the proper way to conduct a task. And, okay, this one gets me all the time. Absolutely do not rely on past work history as a method of training or as a type of confirmation the employee knows how to do the task or use equipment. Not all the people tell 100% of the truth all the time when it comes to their job history or their experiences. And that prior employer, maybe they didn't train them on safe work practices. We want our employees trained to do it our way, the right way, the safe way. Now, who are our stakeholders that need to be involved in this, right? How do we get this to make sure we're ensuring effective safety onboarding? Human resources, which helps us to get an employee hired, ensuring we are within compliance, but they can also help us add safety questions to our applications and interview process. HR is going to conduct most or all of the pre-hire legwork. They're going to do that by checking employment history, running background checks if necessary. Our supervisors and managers, they should work with each stakeholder to make sure the process works, which means setting the expectations for the candidate in that position. What does it take to do the job and do it safely? They should be coordinating hands-on training and continued development for the new hire and monitoring as well as modifying the performance if it's needed. Safety professionals, we get to set the tone for each employee's safety experience. How so, you may ask? By developing safety programs and processes, working directly with HR and hiring managers to make sure that they know what the best practices are and what is legally required for compliance. The best practices can help with the development of essential job functions, which in turn helps make sure the candidate is capable of doing the job. And of course, our employees, they need to be trained. They need to understand what the expectations are. We can help them continue to develop their involvement in our safety culture by providing them a good foundation from the start. The onboarding process overview. What do we need to include in the onboarding process? We've discussed the inclusion of pre-employment safety communication a little bit, but we can also include our expectations of them in our interview and interactions. Onboarding should give them safety training sessions, orientation to the safety programs, and of course, make sure all required paperwork is completed, because we all know If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Okay, this is my slide where I ask if we all want to stand up and stretch, but we all know there's no time for that. We're just going to keep digging in. Here we go. Key topics for onboarding. So now this is where some of the rubber meets the road. For those of us who are responsible for employee safety, this is going to be a simple reminder. For those of us in HR or operations, maybe this is new. But either way, I love this part and I hope you find value in it too. We talked earlier on the 4 key topics to include in new hire onboarding, new hire orientation. So let's talk about the hows and whys of that. Hazard recognition and reporting. It is our responsibility to train employees on the hazards in their work environment. And included in that is, what is a hazard? Well, the what a hazard is directly related to you and your workplace. Do you have an office where the hazards are maybe mostly ergonomics or slip, trips, and falls? Do you work in a warehouse or manufacturing operation with forklifts, scissor lifts, heck, even ladders? Or do you have machines, saws, drills, presses, or a myriad of other types of equipment? So based on your operations, those employees, they need to be trained on what those hazards are, not just for their tasks, but also within their workplace. Now that we know what a hazard is, they need to be trained how to report them. Here's something I try to tell everyone. Follow up on all reported items to the employee who made the report. If an employee feels like the concern isn't addressed, they may eventually stop reporting them. We don't want that. Teach employees to report and openly discuss near misses. The more times we have a near miss, the more likely it won't be a miss in the future. We talked a little bit earlier about second nature and muscle memory. We need to provide thorough emergency response training, conduct drills regularly. We don't want our employees not having the experience or knowledge of what to do when they're in a heightened fight or flight mode. We want their training to kick in and for them to naturally exit, to use a fire extinguisher, to know who to call in case of emergencies, and lastly, to be able to recognize a workplace violence situation. Do you as employers have protocols in place for employees to report outside issues that may follow them into the workplace, creating a potential for not just that employee to be injured, but also for others, right? We all know in California now we have to have a workplace violence prevention plan. But for everybody else, I'm asking that today you jot this down and you make a plan. Train employees and remind them regularly what to look for and how to have these sensitive discussions. Of course, workplace violence can be from a variety of other reasons and exposures, which includes robberies. I'm not going to wade too far off into this, right? Because specific states have specific legislation about employees and robberies and interactions, but I want you to review your operations, train your employees according to your specific exposures. Train, 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 evaluate, reconfigure, and then repeat this cycle endlessly. Some key safety topics for onboarding. PPE is a bit of a broad covering topic, but each of you knows what PPE is required in your operations. But if not, you can conduct a PPE hazard assessment. If you need help with those types of forms, checklists, just reach out to the moderator email. We can send you samples of those types of forms, super easy. PPE hazard assessment helps you to make sure you're using the correct protection for the task by a show of making sure you've reviewed it, you're showing your employees that you care about their safety. So now it's more than just giving them the PPE and telling them to wear it. That isn't necessarily effective, right? We have to make sure they're trained on the proper use and care of that PPE. Employers are required to provide the PPE, but what good is it if it doesn't fit correctly? So instead of handing an employee a pair of gloves or safety glasses, ask them to try them on. Do they fit? Remember, Not all people are built the same. You might need different styles and sizes. So make sure you're reviewing that. Another example, and I don't want to wade too far into this because it's one of my favorite rabbit holes, is the N95 masks. Those are technically respirators. It says it on the package. So if a safety data sheet, SDS, doesn't call for an N95, then maybe what you're looking for is a dust mask to help with nuisance dust. Get dust masks. If your employees are voluntary wearing N95s, that's a whole nother can of worms. So your PPE shouldn't just be reviewed and put in place, but you need to know what programs and processes you need in place for that PPE. Cover the essential safe work practices and procedures related to the job-specific tasks, equipment, operation, general workplace safety. The training given to the employees needs to be specific to what they do and where they work. Provide them with guidelines, expectations, and best practices on their job and tasks. Remind them that each employee's safety and their work environment matters. So if they see something, they should say something. They also need to understand how to go about doing their job and how that could either be positive or negative as an impact on their coworkers. Not using a piece of equipment or a tool correctly, that may not hurt them, but it could hurt somebody else. Dropping a tool from a height or an elevated platform, right? So we don't want somebody else to get injured. We want to make sure that we're going through our pre-task planning, being aware of our surroundings so that we can help protect ourselves and others. Teach your employees not just the basics, but dig in a little deeper, ask them for their feedback. What do they think could be a hazard? How do they think it could be controlled? More key topics. We can say to use the 5 whys when we're looking at accident and incident investigations, but I personally prefer you don't stop at 5. Keep drilling down, keep going further back and find the root cause. Train your employees so that they know they need to report all incidents and accidents and injuries, no matter how minor. Explain what the point and purpose of the investigation is. You're not looking to place blame. You want to help protect somebody else from getting hurt in the future. That you want them to be involved in the investigation, to provide as much detail as possible, because that's how we are going to prevent them from reoccurring these types of injuries. Of course, near misses, right? A near miss today can be an injury tomorrow. That forklift came around the corner and nearly. The edge of that rug nearly made me fall, right? So report those near misses. Train them not to just report obvious hazards or issues, but items that we might think are a potential. Potential hazards are a little like near misses. They just haven't hurt somebody yet. Of course, follow up with the reporting employee. What's the corrective action that's going to be taken? When is it going to be completed? Do they have questions or concerns? If we don't show that we take their conversations and reports seriously each and every time, they may stop bringing things to our attention. Of course, I'm not saying that every item or discussion may warrant a corrective action. However, if that's the case, you need to discuss that and the reason why it's not an issue with that employee and thank them. Okay, engaging new hires in safety. All right, we're going to take our new hire employees and how do we get them engaged in our safety process? We need to use effective communication strategies. Many people have taken the DISC survey where it talks about your communication style. I'm an I and a D, which means I communicate with enthusiasm, but I want results. Everybody's different. So I am a all go, no slow person, and that's hard for some people. I have to gauge my audience. How are they receiving it, right? Do I need to pause? Do I need to check in with them? Everybody has to be involved in the communication process. So know your communication style. Try to know the communication style of others. Try using 3-way communication. We have somebody who's giving the message, we have somebody who's receiving the message, and we have the message, right? We got to have all 3 pieces to get that going. So get feedback from new employees, check in with them often, figure out how they communicate. Make sure we can provide new hires with access to safety resources such as manuals, posters, online platforms, training materials. and onboarding, right? We want to make sure that the onboarding we know it can be overwhelming. So you may tell them today where the online items or binders are at, but they may not remember in a day or two. So part of the hands-on training should be include showing them again. Of course, each time the programs are updated, they should be provided with that update and given a notification. So maybe your company wants to use text alerts or newsletters or email blasts, whatever works. Set that up for your organization. Encourage active participation and feedback from new hires. Invite them to attend the safety committee meetings. Discuss how your suggestion box works. And of course, tell them about your recognition programs. Recognition programs don't need to be elaborate. If it doesn't fit your operation, do something simple like caught being safe, small gift cards or entries into drawings, whatever works. The more we can involve them, our employees, in our safety culture, the more it will matter to them and the better aligned they'll be with our values. So for each of you, just think about, do you have a recognition program? Is it something you could put in place? All right, evaluating the onboarding process. We're closing in on the last few slides. A little sigh of relief here because I move at hyper speed. We want to use the continuous cycle of improvement, which means we need to see how the new hires are doing on retention and comprehension of what they learned. How do we evaluate the effectiveness of our onboarding process? That thing that we put so much effort into, right? We can use assessments, quizzes, and practical demonstrations to assess knowledge retention and comprehension. I like the hands-on show me assessment the best, but I happen to be a visual person. We want to be aware of the smile and nod response. This is a great time to get employees to demonstrate their comprehension, right? Sometimes people might just naturally agree or smile and nod, right? It may look like they are understanding and agreeing based on that physical cue, but we need some confirmation of that, some tangible proof. Companies should be tracking safety performance metrics such as incidence rates, near misses, and safety observations. I'm sure you can imagine, because I'm a little bit of an HR safety person and it's my thing, that these are my favorite things to use. I love observations. We can use each of these measures to help see the effectiveness of our onboarding process, identify areas for improvement, and if there's gaps, we need to keep rebuilding the cycle, right? Keep redoing that cycle, review it, improve it, try it again. So that continuous improvement of our onboarding process. We talked about assessing the comprehension and understanding. I've referenced the continuous cycle of improvement a few times through the presentation, but let's look at ways we can add to our onboarding evaluation process. Those assessments can include feedback, but let's make it a feedback loop. What did the employee bring to us? How can we address it? Discuss that with the employee. Now the question is, did it correct the concern or the item? Let's hope so, but if not, let's look into it a little bit more, look into that feedback and get a resolution. Data analysis. How are injuries trending? What might our first aid log report tell us? Oh, what? You don't have a first aid log? Think about putting one in place. What do our evaluations and assessments say about the onboarding process? Do we need to make more modifications? And finally, make sure we're incorporating lessons learned from the continuous enhancement of our process. Did our audience's eyes glaze over a little too quickly? Did we get too technical? How can we cut back to keep them engaged? Now let's soak this in for a little bit, and I'm going to give you a few brief real-world examples. So these are some case studies that I pulled. This one is about engaging new hires through safety mentoring. A construction company assigned safety mentors to new hires during their onboarding period. These mentors provided guidance, answered safety-related questions, and emphasized the importance of safe work practices. The mentorship program improved safety knowledge, retention, reduced accidents, and fostered a sense of support and camaraderie among the employees. So what's the takeaway here to this? It's that safety mentors can play a crucial role in engaging and educating new hires, resulting in a smoother onboarding process and enhanced safety awareness. Utilizing and leveraging technology for interactive onboarding. We all know technology is everywhere, okay? It's nonstop nowadays. So there's a technology firm that incorporated interactive and gamified elements into their safety onboarding process. New employees completed online modules, quizzes, and virtual reality simulations that simulated workplace hazards and emergency scenarios. This approach increased engagement, knowledge retention, and compliance with safety protocols. So utilizing this technology-based tool and tools and simulations can make safety onboarding more interactive, more engaging, more effective. Integrating safety training with job-specific onboarding. This is a big deal. Not every job is the same, right? So we want to relate to their specific job. So a logistics company integrated safety training seamlessly with job-specific onboarding. New hires received safety training tailored to their specific roles, such as forklift operations or material handling. By integrating safety measures directly into job-specific training, employees acquired the necessary safety knowledge while learning their job responsibilities, right? So we have made it so that the employees are receiving relevant safety information right from the very start and enhancing their understanding and adherence to the safety protocols. Continuous improvement through feedback and evaluation. A healthcare organization implemented a feedback-driven onboarding system. New hires were encouraged to provide feedback on their safety onboarding experience, and their input was used to identify areas for improvement. Regular evaluations were conducted to assess the effectiveness of the onboarding program and make necessary adjustments. So what's the takeaway here? It is that feedback and evaluation mechanisms enable organizations to continuously improve their safety onboarding process and address where there might be gaps or shortcomings. So here's what we know. I mentioned the continuous loop. We're going to have a loop moment right now. Based upon the loss data we reviewed in the beginning, we need to focus on the new hires, getting them more thoroughly trained in the beginning on how to conduct their jobs safely. Remember, it's that 0 to 6 months range having the most injuries. Instead of safety being breezed over as just a safety topic, right, in our onboarding and new hire process, we need to instill safety as a value with them and keep finding ways to add to their safety knowledge. Main points to consider to have an effective employee onboarding process that demonstrates the employee importance of safety from the start. Those main points are: integrating safety into the onboarding process from day one is crucial for creating a safe and secure work environment. Safety onboarding leads to improved safety performance, accident prevention, and hazard awareness. Benefits of prioritizing safety in onboarding: that includes increased productivity, reduced turnover, improved job satisfaction, and enhanced overall workplace morale. By establishing a strong safety culture from the beginning of the onboarding process, organizations can create a safer, healthier, and more productive environment. These are some real-world, make sure that you use some real-world examples to demonstrate positive outcomes, right? We saw those real-world examples where they did the right things in the beginning, they prioritized safety in the onboarding process, and they continued prioritizing it. We know that by neglecting safety during the onboarding process, it can result in potential risks, incidents, and negative consequences. That, my dear friends, in classic Phaedra high-speed fashion with about 6 minutes to spare, is our presentation. So we can take a couple questions if we have them. If not, we will wrap up and everybody will go do their thing.
Thanks, Phaedra, for all the information. We do have one question, and somebody asked, are there any safety certification programs to certify specific employees? I did ask for more of, I wasn't sure quite what the question was, and they haven't responded. So does that question make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. So,
Okay.
so on the final slide, what you'll see is a whole bunch of alphabet soup after my name, right? So one of those is COSS. That stands for Certified Occupational Safety Specialist. So this is through Alliance Safety. There are countless safety trainings, safety designations that you can, so where would I start? I would start at the simplest level of OSHA trainings, right? So OSHA is the bare minimum. And if we want somebody to have an OSHA 10 in general industry, we can send them to those classes. If we want them to have a 30, which is a more in-depth training, we can send them to that. There's specialized OSHA trainings for construction. There are food safety specialists. I am also a construction specialist. I am a certified office ergonomics analyst, right? So think about what your workplace does. What are your hazards? Find an association for your type of industry. So if it's agriculture, there are tons of agricultural community associations. They offer trainings. Get involved in finding the things that fit your organization. If you need help, right, making, what do I like to call them, safety first responders, right, safety team leads, whatever that item might be, because you can't just do it once. You have to grow this down the line, right, because employees retire, but things happen. So we always have to have multiple people in line with that safety knowledge. So build a team. Have them help train your employees as your safety people.
Great. Somebody wanted to know if there are any resources for standardized emergency procedures for a residential facility that has to build a manual from scratch.
Oh, absolutely, yes. So everybody is going to want to know about this, right? Let me see if I can, oof, I'm taking a risk here. I'm not a risky person by nature. Let's go to, so I always just type in Cal OSHA. So Cal OSHA is my favorite go-to. And then if you just go to Cal OSHA website, and if you go to their search bar, right, and you can see I oftentimes search for a lot of things, ooh, respiratory protection, and you can put in here emergency, I think they call them emergency preparedness plan. So if we just start there, right? So there are going to be, the standard is going to be on there, and oftentimes they will even have a sample program. So Cal OSHA is always where I would start. Now, where else would I start if I wanted a little free something? Universities, they share their plans. So you can always do an easy Google search, but if you will send Michelle the moderator email address, or Michelle, if you'll jot down the person who asked the question.
Yes.
We have a Cal OSHA template. You would just need to modify it to fit your operations, because remember, a template is only as good as the things that you put in it. And you have to, of course, train your employees on it as well.
Great. Okay, yeah, and so everybody that's looking has requested forms, the PPE forms. We'll go ahead and follow up with an email. We'll also provide a link to access a copy of this presentation. We want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar presented by Heffernan. Again, we'll send you an email with instructions on how to access a copy of the presentation on our website. Thank you, Phaedra, for your time and expertise today. We hope all of the attendees found today's webinar to be a valuable use of your time. Be sure to join us on August 27th for our Employee Benefits Healthcare Trend Insights webinar. Thank you all and have a safe and great day.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Michelle. Take care.
All right, you too. Thanks.